My name is Tara Perry. I'm the Executive Director of Pioneer Valley Project, and welcome to South Congregational Church, which we call home. Thanks for joining us today. Just a couple of
I'm sorry, we can't hear you anymore.
I think someone muted me again. Okay, here we go. Unmute myself. I unmuted and then it was muted. Okay, can you hear me now? Okay, you all on the Zoom are not concerned about where the restroom is, so I won't repeat that information. So again, thanks for joining us today. This is going to be a great report launch, and we're excited to hear more about the findings. And I'm going to pass to one of our teen organizers at PVP, Davian Pagan.
So thank you to Tara for that. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Davian. As Tara said, I'm a teen organizer here at PVP. I would like to start by thanking those who came to listen to the findings. So thank you for coming. We would also like to thank Citizens for Juvenile Justice for doing all their research and work on school policing. School policing is something that I and all of us here at PVP really care about and, are really passionate about. And it's felt close to home for me and, all my friends, because at the school that I go to, we have security and police. In May 2023, CfJJ held a meeting with students regarding police presence in our high schools, and the report echoes much of the conversations between students and CfJJ. The report only strengthens the fact that policing in our schools isn't helpful to teens like me here in the city. It instills a sense of fear into students, and the data presented today will express that. Now I'd like to pass it on to Leon Smith, who is the Executive Director for Citizens for Juvenile Justice.
Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Wonderful. So good afternoon, everyone. I want to thank all of you all for being here today, both virtually as well as those that are there in person, and even more for those in Springfield. As a community, thank you so much for the way that you've embraced working with us over the past 6 months or so in developing this report. As a statewide organization that holds community engagement and coalition building as a core foundational element of our work, partnerships like we've had with you all there in Springfield really mean everything to us. Again, I'm Leon Smith. I'm the Executive Director at CfJJ, and I'm just really excited for the release of our first Arrested Futures Revisited report that spotlights Springfield. For a little history, in 2012, we collaborated with the ACLU National and ACLU of Massachusetts on the original Arrested Futures report, illuminating the presence and harm of the school-to-prison pipeline in Massachusetts' 3 largest cities, Boston, Worcester, and Springfield. Now, over a decade later, after calling out these issues and shining the spotlight on them, we wanted to revisit and see if things had improved. Starting there in Springfield, both sadly and maddeningly, the answer to that is no. Black students in Springfield remain disproportionately suspended and arrested, both of which lead directly into the school-to-prison pipeline. The disparities that we see at the front door of our juvenile justice system are driven by these actions by police in schools. Students with disabilities who already face challenges accessing the curriculum continue to be disproportionately punished, losing key hours of instruction that drives them even further behind. And as the Massachusetts legislature over the years has made some changes to the law to reduce the flow of young people into our juvenile system from schools, such as the creation of a model SRO MOU commission that must be implemented by all districts with SROs, Springfield's current MOU still falls short of meeting all of the requirements that are in the law and that are in the model MOU. So this afternoon, my colleague Josh Dankoff is going to go through all the findings of this report, but he's also going to lift up recommendations that were developed collaboratively with young people there in the community. Because at the end of the day, we have to stop this harm that's being subjected on our young people by the same system of education that's supposed to educate them and lift them up so that they can have a better future. So with that, I'll pass on to my colleague Josh, and we can get today's program started. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Leon, and thank you everyone here. 1 second. All right. Hello, I'm Josh Dankoff, Director of Strategic Initiatives at Citizens for Juvenile Justice, and it's a pleasure to be here with you, both in person and also for you in Zoom. The only logistical note I will say for those on Zoom is that we will have time for question and answer for people here in the room, as well as Zoom. If you, for folks on Zoom, just drop your questions in the chat. We will get those communicated for us here. So please write them down. The report is now live. There's a paper copy of the executive summary here. If you want to, oh, you can't see that, can you? Yeah, if you can just probably minimize the screen there. There's a QR code here on your screen for those who like QR codes, or you can go to the CfJJ.org arrested-futures-Springfield. So as Leon said, this report is our first in a series of the Arrested Futures Revisited. The report that CfJJ did together with ACLU covered Boston, Worcester, and Springfield. Springfield is first in our revisited series, and we're already working on reports in Lowell and Boston. But the data has improved. It took a lot of effort to put together and pull together the data from 12 years ago. It's a little easier now, which is good. But for me, that doesn't mean the work is done just because we can see the data. We have to analyze the data, still talk to people, understand if the data trends are legitimate, and still make actions to improve on our systems. So today, we're going to talk a little bit about, there are 5 major findings in the report. The first 2 are quite data heavy, so bear with me. Those are the ones that are really looking at data around school discipline and data around school policing and school arrests. And then the last 3 are not data heavy. One really is an analysis of the MOU, the Memorandum of Understanding between SPS, the public school system, and SPD, the police department, and some of the shortcomings in that Memorandum of Understanding. And then there's some findings around school climate that really built from conversations in this room and elsewhere, from a couple of focus group discussions that we had with young people who experience what it means to be in schools in the city of Springfield. And finally, a finding around treatment of court-involved youth. I will just say, all of these findings, the data ones and the not data ones, relate to here in Springfield, but don't feel, sometimes people say, why are people picking on Springfield? We're not picking on Springfield. As I mentioned, we are working on reports in Boston and Lowell, and CfJJ has done other work in New Bedford with a report there. And it's important that, look, I live in Boston, and I try my best to hold the community where I live accountable. And as a Massachusetts organization, Citizens for Juvenile Justice is committed to making sure that all young people in the Commonwealth are able to reach their full potential. And part of that is making sure that their time in school is not marred by school discipline and unnecessary school arrest. All right. I just wanted to start, well, we already talked a little bit about this. So the discipline rates, we'll start with our data here. There was unsurprisingly a very large drop in the school discipline rate in school year 2020 to 21. For those here in the room. On the left side, that's 27 school year 17-18, and the school discipline rate was 8.8, which means almost 9% of students in Springfield Public Schools had some sort of school discipline, either in school or out of school suspension or expulsion. And that number was dropping, and then there was a precipitous drop in COVID, as we see in data across pretty much everything when people were at school, at home. And then things popped right back up in the 2021 to 2022 school year. So just to note that some people saw the COVID and the school closures as an opportunity to really look at some systemic changes. We think that some things were undertaken during that time, but there's absolutely still work to do here in Springfield. It's important to note in the time period between 2012 and now, there have been some important statewide legislative changes that have, as I mentioned already, improved the data availability, but also have tried to address. The legislature has done a number of things to really try to address and reduce the school to prison pipeline. I'll just mention a few here, and these are highlights, but it's important to think of this and the data that we're looking at now as a point in time, but also as part of a process, right? We're not done here. There's room for continued advocacy, both at the statewide level and at the citywide level. So in 2012, the Chapter 222 created some due process protections for students who were subject to school discipline and improved the district level school discipline data that was needed to be reported to DESE. That has enabled us to know better across the Commonwealth without having to rely on public records requests what's happening in terms of school discipline. This criminal justice reform legislation in 2018 also required schools and police to have these MOUs, these Memorandum of Understanding, a contract. If you're going to be if you're a school district and you're going to have police coming into your school and be based at the school, you need to define that relationship and not just have things happen with too much variability. And it also improved data collection. In 2020, as part of the police reform legislation, the legislature made it clear that schools did not need to have SROs, school resource officers, right? This is prior to that, it was required that districts engage with police on this level. And it was important to say, we don't actually need to have school resource officers at all. It also created the Model MOU Commission to say, to again look at what should this relationship between the police department and school districts look like. We'll return to that in one of the findings later. And even last year in 2012, as part of the addressing barriers to care for mental health, there was an increase in restorative justice implementation to happen at school. But really, the real action, these are statewide things, and we do commend the legislature for the work it's done. There's still more work to do, but ultimately, the real work happens at the municipal level, right? And that's why we're here to really talk about municipal level data. It depends on the policies and practices and the dynamics that are happening in schools and between schools and police. So the first set of findings and the real data, apologies in advance for a series of some data heavy slides, but we're going to do this together. The first finding, this first set of findings are around school discipline. Okay, and this is from both public-facing data on DESE's website, as well as some cross-tabulated data that DESE creates to let you drill down and understand which populations of young people are subject to school discipline. And the first finding is that Black students here in Springfield are overrepresented among disciplined SPS students. So while Black students make up 18 to 19% of Springfield's schools enrollment between 2017 and the present, the numbers are between 19 and 24% of all students disciplined. And on the far right set of charts that you see, the far right red one is 7.3%. This is the overall level of school discipline, but that higher blue chart at 9.3%. That's the higher level of discipline, school discipline for Black students. So we're seeing this overrepresentation of Black students for school exclusion. And hold on to your question if you don't mind. I appreciate the question, but we're going to do Q&A at the end. But thank you, sir. It was not just Black students that were overrepresented in school discipline, but also students with disabilities and students who are considered low income are also overrepresented. So students with disabilities made up 31% of all of the students who were disciplined, but only 24% of enrolled students. And similarly, low-income students have a higher level of discipline than you would expect based on their proportion to the population. So, and by students with disabilities, these are students with IEPs, right? The schools are specifically supposed to be meeting their needs and following, providing free and appropriate public education. And they're supposed to be doing this following these individual educational plans. And sadly, they're relying on school discipline too much for that population. We also see that this school discipline rate differs widely between schools. And I'm sorry for people in the room who can't read this. We'll share this. This will all be online to review, and all of it is in the report. But we see that Springfield Middle School and Springfield Public Day Middle School, which are alternative schools in the same building, have the highest discipline rate, had the highest discipline rate in school year 21-22. And this light blue bar shows the district-wide average, which is 7.4, whereas these two schools had 14, at the highest level, 18.9 and 14.5% of their students were disciplined. So more than twice and almost 3 times as high. And the other schools that had higher than average levels of discipline rates were Springfield Public Day, Springfield Central, and Springfield High School of Science and Technology. So it's important to drill down as far as we can on the data and recognize that different schools have different school cultures. And part of what school administrators can do at the district level is help set policies and priorities, but also it's up to school principals and the teachers to really live out the policies and set that school culture question. And we are very concerned by some of these high levels, especially that the two schools with the highest level of discipline are middle schools is particularly concerning. The last data-heavy slide in this finding are to just say that within these schools that have the highest disciplinary rates, students of color were also over-disciplined. So in school year 21-22, there were 0 white students who were disciplined in public day or high school or public day elementary school. For those in the room here, the Black students are represented by the blue lines and the Hispanic students are represented by the green lines, whereas the total is in red at the right. So you see a large overrepresentation of Black and Hispanic students at some of the schools that, but also within in terms of the rate within that school, across all of these schools that we're concerned about. Okay, we'll do recommendations as we go. I'm not going to read all of these because it's a lot to read, but I want to just mention that we do have a series of recommendations around school discipline. The public schools should apply a restorative justice framework in their curriculum and disciplinary system. They should consider creating an equity and school climate team to address these stark racial disparities in discipline data. The public school should also ensure that students receive culturally responsive instruction from educators, and the city of Springfield overall should consider and conduct a full and thorough audit of the public school's special education department with a focus on practices at these public day schools. Those numbers at those public day schools are really very concerning for us. Okay, so we're going to move from one set of data to a second. We're making good time. The second set of data concerns school policing. And this is data from the Springfield Police Department around arrests coming from schools. So from school discipline, which is on suspension, expulsion, to who's actually getting arrested out of schools. Sadly, the first finding in this set of data is that Black students, while representing just 19% of the school population, make up 47% of the school arrests in school year 21-22. The data on the right-hand side is district-wide, and the data in those four small squares on the left-hand side are individual schools. So you saw, looking at the data here from 2019 and 2020, we skipped 2020 to 21 because most people were at home. You see that this very large number of, the highest number of arrests were of Hispanic students, and then second were Black students. And three white students were arrested in either three or two students arrested there. And the schools that have the highest numbers of arrests are Commerce High, SciTech, and Springfield Public Day High School. Overall, Black and Latina students make up over 85% of the student arrests in Springfield. So that's arrests coming from schools. We are able to look at the number of charges that were taking place. And while most of the arrests, 60% of the students were arrested with multiple charges, only 53, and this is the entire data set from 2018 to 2022, only 53 students had one arrest. The majority had more than one, with even some facing not more than one arrest, more than one charge within that arrest. And I just want to point out one thing, that 93% of the resisting arrest charges, so 39 out of the 42, were against Black and Latina students. The reason we're highlighting that is that a resisting arrest is often used by police to cover up an officer's excessive use of force. And we are really concerned that this charge is coming up so much in student arrests in Springfield. You'll see, if anyone's seen, and sadly we have lots of video, when you hear police say, stop resisting, that can just be their way of setting the groundwork, even if no one is physically resisting, to have a resisting arrest charge. The next finding is that out of the 323 charges, 250 or 77% of the charges were for misdemeanor offenses. So these are the less serious, not felony offenses, just misdemeanors. And that by far the most frequent charge was for assault and battery, making up almost half of all of the charges. And again, the second most frequent is resisting arrest. Just to note, the third is disturbing the peace or disturbing school. We do appreciate that one of the charges, at least that used to be very frequent in schools, disturbing lawful assembly, is no longer chargeable for students. So that is, again, a positive shift in the legislature responding to what were some concerning charges from the police. Okay, I said I wasn't going to read all the last ones, and then I read them. I'm really not going to read all of these. Just to say that concerning school policing, we have a number of recommendations, some towards the district and some for SROs and school staff. The number one recommendation for the district is that we don't think that Springfield should have police in the school setting at all. We think that it's time to not have SROs in schools. And Springfield would not be the first either in the state, and certainly not the first in the country, to be making such a move. There's a lot of research on the impact and the negative impact that having police in schools has on school climate, and on the just having police in schools increases the number of students arrested, just their presence there. So we know that research, and we think it's time, and we hope that this data can help be a tool to help push Springfield to remove police from the school setting overall. We think there's room for restorative justice and as well. So for SROs and school staff, we think it's important to have training on the MOU and to consider alternative methods for addressing distracting classroom behavior, and to really try to reduce this high arrest rate that is predominantly falling on students of color and students with disabilities and students with previous court involvement. Okay, we made it through data. There are 3 findings, and then we'll talk 3 more findings that are not quite as long, but then we'll get to open up for questions. This third set of findings is around the MOU, right? The Memorandum of Understanding. This defines the relationship between the police department and the public school system. This report was actually delayed. We were about to release the report over the summer, and we heard that Springfield had updated its MOU. Their previous MOU is from 2018. So we pressed pause to get the new MOU and look at that MOU in light of this model MOU that a committee of organizations, state agencies, and other organizations put together. And this model MOU was meant to be the floor, to say, look, you can have things have more protections, but you need to make sure you cover all of these things. So our analysis here in these next couple of slides, Tara, can you help with the thanks. The screen went off there. I think it just went to sleep when the computer went to sleep. Maybe it ran out of batteries. We'll keep going. The MOU. So these next couple of slides is considering Springfield's new MOU that was just came out over the summer with the model MOU, right? So and our overall finding is that while stronger than the older one, the 2023 MOU from Springfield Public Schools still has some areas where they don't comply with the model MOU. And it does that in 3 areas. First, the Springfield MOU lacks the safeguards related to school arrest that are provided in the model MOU. There's no language saying that the public school system should minimize the amount of time that students are unnecessarily removed from classrooms. And that is a key part of the model MOU that's missing. Second, they're missing key requirements from SRO selection. How does the police department choose who gets to be a school resource officer? Specifically, there's no built-in mechanism for the community to be involved in the selection process. And that's something that is part of the model MOU that is not present. And finally, that the Springfield's MOU lacks the state required process to incorporate SROs into school environments, and it lacks a complaint system that is required under the state's MOU. So there's no language allowing parents and guardians to submit anonymous complaints, which is something that is required in the model MOU. So again, big picture here, we're glad that Springfield did update the MOU last year or earlier this year, but there's still some areas. They have the model MOU. It was produced in 2022. They pulled some language from it, but this is a clear area for further advocacy to make sure that the district is in line. Are folks in the room okay if I keep going? Okay. Thank you for your help, Tara. The recommendations concerning the MOU are pretty straightforward. Update your MOU to comply with the state's model MOU, right? To look at it, to include guiding principles to respond to student behavior, including the goal to minimize time spent outside of the classroom, to allow community engagement in the SRO process, ensure disclosure of potential conflict of interest that SROs may have, require SROs to work with the community to develop a system for feedback, and to require an anonymous complaint system that parents and guardians receive notification at the beginning of each school year, right? So these are clear areas where the city can do better. All right, a couple of findings on school climate. And many of these findings came directly from conversations we had with young people. And the finding is that conversations with Springfield students suggest that there is a lack of, that they cannot identify noticeable benefits from, but they can identify noticeable harms from the SRO presence in their schools. And just to mention a couple of the practices that were mentioned that we found concerning, there were accounts of students of the police using pepper spray without first attempting to de-escalate tactics. There were reports of inappropriate behavior by officers towards female students, and reports of the use of discriminatory or targeted searching and police practices. As one student said, quote, "Currently there's no balance. We understand the teachers' and administrators' perspectives on safety and security, but they don't understand us." The second finding in the school climate section of the report is that security measures have a disproportionately negative mental health impact on students, especially those who have had previous juvenile court involvement and students with disabilities. So a lot of students talked about metal detectors and bag searches, and even just the presence of SROs overall as really impacting them negatively. We need to listen to that as a society and as a group of advocates, and certainly as the school community, they need to listen to that. And overall, sadly, Springfield students reported a general lack of trust in the adults in their school community. That included SROs, but it went beyond that to even show a lack of trust of some teachers and administrators, and private security, as was mentioned before. So what can Springfield Public Schools do about school climate? First, schools should invest in non-punitive responses to address chronic disciplinary issues, such as vaping. Schools should implement a method by which families and their students and their families can submit to a regular feedback mechanism regarding school culture and ways to improve it. We think that SPS should end school security and surveillance practices that give police unrestricted access to the collected school data and surveillance information. And that schools should implement de-escalation strategies to ensure that administrators, counselors, and behavioral therapists are staffed as well and well-trained to handle situations that could be worsened by punitive responses or police presence. All right, the final finding is very specific, but also very important, right? Citizens for Juvenile Justice knows and works with and thinks a lot about the juvenile justice system, right? That's young people who are in conflict with the law, and that involves young people who are court involved. And we think a lot about upstream questions, right? Most of what we've talked about here is upstream, things that have before young people have gotten into court, and really that's where our attention should be. And for young people who are court involved, the school district still has a role to play in supporting them. And that's where this one finding is on. So unfortunately, we find that SPS, the public school system, creates barriers for the enrollment of previously committed students who are previously committed to Department of Youth Services, and funnels them into the district's alternative schools. So one thing that SPS does is that they inappropriately require students who are attempting to enroll in school to fill out a pre-registration form that includes questions about their juvenile court involvement, including arrest, before enrolling or registering them in a new school. So to say that again, the school district is requiring students to report on past juvenile court involvement just when they're trying to get back into school, get back into school. We've heard that children with prior juvenile court involvement get flagged for the Students of Concern Committee and are presented with contracts and asking them to consent to an evaluation by that Students of Concern Committee, which often can delay re-enrollment and the sort of a pathway into the alternative schools. So the recommendations around enrollment of court-involved youth, that SPS should cease this practice. They shouldn't be asking parents to supplement their students' complete school record with any incidents involving suspension or violation of criminal acts. And this quote here in the slide is straight from Massachusetts general laws. A student's past juvenile court involvement and records are confidential and should not play a role when a student is just trying to re-enroll in school. And similarly, SPS should not use the same process that's created for students transferring from a different school district. They should not apply that to students who are previously committed to DYS. Those students should remain SPS students, enrolled students, even during their time in state custody. So, as I said, a very specific finding, but important one nonetheless. I'm going to stop talking. That is, as you heard, a series of findings from data that show that here we are 12 years after or 11 years after the CfJJ and ACLU's report on school to prison pipeline from 2012. There are still a lot of concerns that we have. We think the data points to those concerns, and we think that the stories we heard from young people also point to these concerns. But we also know that there are ways to overcome that and to address these concerns. The recommendations in the report, we think, can go in that direction. And ultimately, it is for all of us, and especially young people in Springfield and organizations in Springfield to help push the duty bearers in this situation, the public school system and the police, to do their best to really undo and stop the school to prison pipeline. So I'm going to stop, and for questions, we can take questions from the room and also questions on, I'm going to just look at what's happening in the chat on Zoom as well. As I mentioned, the report is live at cfjj.org/arrested-futures-Springfield, or from our publications page. And also, I didn't say at the beginning, which was my fault, a huge thank you to our co-hosts of this event and of the launch of this report, PVP for the space, Mass Senior Action Council, YSET, and ACLU. Thank you, Darrell Lee Jenkins Resource Center and ACLU of Massachusetts. Thank you all for co-hosting this event. All right, we'll start, I think, with questions in the room. I saw there was one hand, and I'm monitoring the chat here as well. Yes, sir.
Hi. On your
For those on Zoom, I will repeat the question just to make sure everyone can hear. But go ahead, please.
on your select key findings, the first one, are those statistics from the total school population or a survey of the population?
That is the total school population. So it's the reason why it says, the question was looking at the select key findings that reads that Black students are overrepresented among disciplined SPS students, and that between 2017 and 2022, Black students made up between 18 and 19% of the school population, but 19 to 24% of students disciplined. So the question is on that. The reason why there's a range there is that the population level of discipline shifted a little year to year, but it was close enough for us to say between that time, the Black students made up 18% of the school population, but between 19 and 24% of discipline.
Yeah, that doesn't seem to me to be a big disparity. It seems very close, actually.
Okay, I'm happy to, I appreciate that. I think it is, another way to look at it is that for this last year where data is available, if the overall discipline rate is 7.3% and for Black students is 9.3%, I didn't calculate a relative rate index would be one way to say Black students are X times more likely to be disciplined, but 9/3 over 7/3. Yeah, it's about 30% more likely. So is that big or small? Look, I'm not a Black student in the school systems here, but I still find that concerning. But
What does that mean?
yeah,
Does that mean that the discipline is biased? Or does it mean that these particular Black students don't behave like this?
so I'm just going to repeat what you said for Zoom purposes. The question is, what is the disparity due to bias in the system, or is it due to differential behavior? That's a good question, and one that the data do not answer. I think we've seen when you look across all systems of disparity and all systems in public schools, you see similar concerns. I see that Leon, our executive director, has raised his hand. So, Leon, give me a second here. I'm gonna figure out, can we just need to deal with audio yeah. Leon, go ahead and talk and see if you can hear you.
All right, can you hear me now? Great. So to the question of why and what leads to disparities, there's been significant national research done on this issue, which has found that differences in school discipline and how it's applied to different students cannot be explained by differences in student behavior. It's found that students of color get punished more severely for less serious or more subjective infractions. And particularly looking at younger students, that behavior that triggers little or no response from white students often results in consequences for students of color. That's from a report from the Kirwan Institute at Ohio State University. There's another report that came out more recently titled School Deferred. And what this report did, because again, they looked as the question that the gentleman in the audience asked, what is leading to these disparities? So they took principals and assistant principals who were charged with disciplinary, had a disciplinary role in their schools, and they gave them hypothetical fact patterns, but they randomized the names to names that sounded white or sounded Black. So for example, they would use Amy and Keisha, for example. And what they found in looking at these principles and the assessments they made of the appropriate punishment was that the exact same behavior, they had the exact same behavior in these fact patterns. The only difference was the name, which denoted the race of the student. And Black students were not only more likely to be punished, they were more likely to be labeled a troublemaker that they needed to keep an eye on based upon that behavior. So I just wanted to share that this has been a topic of national research based upon that question of why the disparities exist. And consistently over the years, it's come back to the fact that where there's subjectivity, that subjective decision-making results in Black students being disciplined more severely, even for the same type of conduct. That's it.
Thanks, Leon. We might keep you there to help field some other questions. There are some questions in the chat, but I want to give one last chance for folks in the room. Yes.
I have the privilege of working at juvenile courts as a surrogate, but also as a private advocate for Springfield schools. And what I have seen, I grew up in racist from the 50-year span of being developed in Springfield. I have seen attempts like this made and upstarted and training happens once and then not for 10, 15 years. For example, when Reverend Brown got stabbed at the Springfield Academy. there was this huge outcry for training about de-escalate. And that went on for years and years, and there wasn't improvement because of that response to tragic death. But year after year after year, when you look at professional development and training, you're not seeing as much. If waters down, and starting to save schools that are really safe as it recommend them. They call it therapeutic, they're far from therapeutic, they're loaded with correction officers and adjudicating adults. So I wish Springfield would change. I doubt it, but there's a school committee and there is the head of the school committee. I think less place. I doubt it will understand in my lifetime. I was shocked. But we can have hope for that model. But I don't see it because of the people who are overseeing the city and how they practice it so forcefully. And I'm not slamming a person for being the head of the school committee, but we have the mayor who's also the head of the school committee. You're overseeing police in the city level, Charleston County School Committee, you have to do with schools. So you have that officer everywhere. That is why, as I would like to see improvements, so I don't know what the answer is, but thank you for letting me share.
Sure. I'm just going to very briefly summarize that just because I'm not sure if the people on Zoom could hear. It was just a comment from the audience for someone who is a lifelong Springfield resident who is, I'd say, not hopeful for change given the history of past reform attempts and some of the structural challenges given who current leadership are and the fact that the mayor is also the chair of the school committee. I didn't hear a question there. No, just a comment. There are some questions in the chat that I want to address or start to address, and then we'll come back to you if that's okay. I'm going to run down these. So when Springfield does not conform to the findings or to the findings, I think to the model SRO, model MOU, are there legal actions we can take? That is one question. Well, I mean, you know that there's most of these findings were not part of the ongoing police reform questions and the consent decree that Springfield is under. That said, I don't know if legal action is the best thing to do. I think for some of these, it's a question of pressuring the school committee and pressuring the police department to update that MOU. There's a question of accountability. They just did it, and why didn't they do it in line with this model? Is something that can be posed directly to them. Leon, do you want to add anything to that?
I mean, what I would state is, again, this statewide model SRO MOU, it was created by a permanent commission that was created by the 2020 policing legislation. And the chairs of that commission are the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education, as well as the Executive Office of Public Safety and Security. Given that it's clear that the Springfield version doesn't live up to the letter of the law, I think it's not a lawsuit per se, but having someone contact DESE, the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education, and notifying them as one of the chairs of that commission that it's out of alignment, that would certainly be an appropriate action.
Thanks, Leon. There are a couple other questions here. I'm also aware of the time. I want to be respectful of people who only have an hour. So we'll try to get through a couple more questions and then come back to you in the room. There's a question of which districts in Massachusetts have the best practices for school discipline or school policing? Are there any particular policies that come to your mind? I'm going to defer to Leon if he wants to say on this.
Could you repeat the question, Josh?
Now, which districts in Massachusetts have the best practices for school discipline and school policing? Are there any specific policies that come to mind?
I mean, certainly there have been. So what I would highlight, the 2020 policing legislation took placement of SROs in schools from something that every district had to do to something that was discretionary. Basically, it's at the discretion of the superintendent, whether or not SROs are in schools. After that took place, we saw a number of districts remove police officers from schools. Districts like Somerville, Brookline, Northampton, but also there are no police in schools in Boston. There are no police in schools in Worcester. I think Worcester has an interesting model where the police officers are not stationed inside of the schools, but they're called liaison officers, where an officer who goes through the same training as an SRO is assigned to a certain section or quadrant of the city, and their job is to respond to any emergencies that happen. Again, people trust police to respond when an incident happens in the community. We don't have a police officer stationed in every backyard or in every store or in every church, but when something happens, the police are called. Our schools aren't in some far off mount on high, they're in our communities. So that type of liaison process makes sense. I also want to point out that there are jurisdictions that are implementing alternatives in the same way that cities across the country have. You look at cities like, one thing that folks always say is, oh, those models would never work in our city, but what's going on? Well, I think in LA, they've had significant issues with things like gang violence and other types of social issues. And yet they moved $25 million in their budget for more social workers, for restorative justice practitioners. They have this interesting model of credible messengers, individuals from the communities where the schools are, who work directly with young people who have proven more effective at de-escalating these types of fights. So there's discussions happening in other cities, but then also when you look at how the Somervilles and the Worcesters and the Brooklines have gone about removing police officers, it's been a full in implementation of restorative practices, not piecemeal, not underfunded, not one poor coordinator being charged with everything, really thoroughly implementing, top to bottom support for those types of practices. So I think those are some jurisdictions where it makes sense to look at what they're doing, but also look nationally at your Phoenixes and Oaklands and LAs, which have scaled back on policing and implemented other practices. And the end result has been better school climate, reduced exclusion, reduced arrests, but also increases in graduation rates and lowering of truancy rates. Kids vote with their feet, and if they don't feel comfortable or they feel targeted in school, they eventually stop showing up. When you have a more restorative culture, the kids feel it and the kids buy in.
Thanks, Leon. I went out of order here and want to apologize. I jumped to Q&A when we were supposed to hear from some additional young people who have this experience here. So first, I apologize to those folks who I jumped the queue to go to Q&A, and we're going to do that now. I know it's 5:01, but don't leave because really the most important words are coming now. So thanks for being with me for this part.
I'll just add that this very room that we're sitting in is where dozens of Springfield teens who are students at Springfield Public Schools had some of the conversations that contributed to the findings in this report. This is also a room where a lot of teens create TikTok content so they can communicate about these really pressing issues with their peers. This is also a room where a lot of strategy takes place among our teen leaders, which led to a recent victory of $3.9 million in additional investment in teen mental health in Springfield Public Schools. And so this room is where a lot is going on among young people in Springfield. And we're proud to be joined by some of those key leaders with us, these key teen leaders. And so I just wanted to introduce Naomi Edwards, who's another teen organizer with us.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Naomi Edwards. As Tara said, I'm a teen organizer with PVP, and I'm a current Springfield Public Schools student. I'd say I'm pretty well behaved. So just wanted to further elaborate on the findings that Josh found, as I have experienced all of the things that he mentioned. So I want to start off by saying, yesterday in school, I was marked tardy because instead of going into school right away, I waited in the cold to get my backpack searched in a line of 50 other students. I arrived to school at 7:25, but I didn't make it to class until 7:40. I didn't have anything illegal in my backpack. My school supplies didn't pose a threat to anyone, but because, I got searched because the Springfield public school system criminalizes, abuses, and does not care for their students. First and foremost, I'd like to say students in every Springfield public high school have their privacy invaded day after day with no probable cause or standard procedure. Every morning, I see my security guard look students up and down and pick who they feel like searching. As you can guess, they most of the time look like me. I'm not a threat. My peers are not a threat. Yet I come to school every morning and get my bag searched purely based on suspicion. Is it a crime for me to want an education? Is it a crime for me to want to go to Yale? Is it a crime for me to want to be successful? Or is it just the fact that Springfield Public School students are mostly minorities that you deem a danger? Getting searched every single day because we may fit your image as suspicious is not normal. This goes far deeper than an annoyance at school or a bad teacher. This has a significantly negative psychological impact on students and their well-being. And while I do believe that school security and safety is important, I also believe that the threat does not come from students, but from people outside. For instance, the police officers assigned to each of our schools. Each public high school has an assigned SRO, or school resource officer, who has been proven to have no real purpose other than to intimidate students, disrupt the school environment, and form a perfect path from high schools to prison. We see that despite only making up 19% of Springfield Public Schools populations, Black students make up almost half of all school arrests. Combined, Black and Latino students make up 85% of all school arrests. This is a problem, and the presence of poorly trained, unnecessary police officers allows this issue to continue. There's no reason why a child in middle school should be arrested for exhibiting childlike behaviors. These unnecessary arrests introduce students to a vicious cycle of incarceration, corruption, and violence. And despite the school resource officer's deliberate contribution to the incarceration of students of color, the inappropriate conduct of these officers also have negatively affected school culture and my learning environment. From the use of racial slurs to the unnecessary use of pepper spray and inappropriate behavior towards female students, school resource officers have proven to be counterproductive to protecting our students. On multiple occasions, walking to my classroom, in the hallway, and even into the cafeteria to eat lunch, I've had to put water into my eyes to stop them from burning from pepper spray because our SROs just feel the need to spray kids for acting like kids. Instead of walking to class and talking to my friends like any other high schooler outside of Springfield, I had to cover my mouth and nose to prevent myself from inhaling pepper spray. Because instead of de-escalating like they're supposed to do, these officers abuse their power and tools that are meant to keep us safe. Moving on, these officers also exhibit inappropriate behaviors towards female students time after time. Why is the police officer that you hired to keep us safe spending an hour in a room alone with a 16-year-old girl? Several high school students across Springfield have reported that SROs have acted inappropriately towards female students, whether that be inappropriate touching, inappropriate jokes, or prolonged time spent one-on-one with female students. These officers are clearly not the people you want to have around kids trying to learn. And with no further ado, I'd like to close by stating that myself and hundreds of other Springfield Public High School students are disappointed. We are disappointed in your inability to keep us safe. We're disappointed in your inability to be role models. And we are disappointed in your inability to guide and inspire us. Springfield's crime rate is at an all-time peak, and with the struggles that minorities already face outside of school, we should not have to deal with even more discriminatory, corrupt practices in our learning space. Thank you.
And now Destiny Cartagena is gonna close us out.
Hello, I'm Destiny, another organizer at PvP. And as we close today, I would like everyone to take this matter into account as everything discussed today has truly shined a different light on the issues regarding school policing. While being glad for the work CfJJ has done to bring awareness and show the report of incidents in school policing, it has brought a new sense of perspective to hear more, especially in regards to experiences today. This topic is something we really care about at PvP, and after the meeting held in May, students gave information as to what it is like in the daily life at school with police around. After that meeting, it became far more clear how fearful students are in their own school environment just because of policing, fueling the passion for this topic even more. I believe we can all agree that what has been gathered and what we have heard today has shown that policing in schools creates an uncomfortable tension that no student should have to deal with. Policing in schools has been proven to be more harmful than helpful over the years. On November 29th, PvP will be another meeting in regards to police access to school surveillance and student safety. We can't let this meeting today go under the radar as just another issue in schools. Every student should feel safe enough to learn and grow, and that is exactly what we are pushing for. So thank you everyone for coming and listening today, and we hope you all take away new ideas.
Thank you for those on Zoom. Thank you for those who came in the room. Sorry if we didn't answer all the questions, but we appreciate you very much. And the report is live. Look forward to action and follow up with the report. Thank you.
Thank you all.